This time on Allies or Enemies, we are looking at Flamme Rouge along with the Peloton expansion. Designed by Asger Granerud, Flamme Rouge is a bicycle racing tour de force for 2 to 4 players, or 1 to 6 with the expansion. This is not a traditional racing game, unless you grew up in a European country and watched a lot of bicycle racing, in which case this is very much a traditional racing game. Unlike Formula One or movies starring Vin Diesel, Flamme Rouge drops the fastness and furiosity for a more nuanced back and forth of tiny swings in position, drafting, and knowing when to lead and when to follow. Let's look at how it actually plays.
You say bark, I say bite. You say shark, I say hey man, let's take a look at how to bicycle race. At its base, Flamme Rouge is exceedingly simple. Each team is made up of 2 riders, a sprinter and a very French named rouleur, the name of which I am no doubt saying incorrectly. Each turn, you draw 4 cards and play 1 for each rider, and then you move that number of spaces, keeping to the inside lane wherever possible. After everyone is moved, riders that are 1 space behind get to slipstream up to the pack, and riders at the front add 1 exhaustion card to their decks. Where it gets tricky is each time you play a card, you discard it forever, so you only get those big numbers once. Also, sometimes your movement is hindered or helped by hills which can lose or gain you precious spaces. Because your deck is built to just barely get you over the finish line, all of these 1 space gains or losses make a huge difference. It's a game of inches, where steady does most often actually win the race.
Here is where the expansion comes in. If you are just sticking with the base game, Flamme Rouge is really a game for 3 or 4 players. Otherwise, the track is just a bit too empty and you lose the fun of multiple packs and traffic jams. But add Peloton to the mix and you can add multiple bot riders, which are exceedingly easy to use and work surprisingly well, making it one of the better 2-player race games going. There are even 2 kinds of bots, a muscle and a racer, which play a bit differently. We've done a bunch of 2-player 2-bot games, and we are shocked at how much fun it is and how little upkeep it is.
The replayability here is pretty high, as the track comes in a bunch of little sections that can be put together however you want. There's quite a few suggested iterations in the box, as well as oodles more online, but probably the biggest thing that's been bringing us back is the Tour app, which makes it possible to run a championship tour of various lengths with individual and team stats and yellow jerseys and a running tally of trophies. I'm 90% sure that it's official as well, but either way, it's free and it's pretty awesome. And while the gameplay is inherently samey, it has that competitive sports thing going for it that just brings you back and back. We've stayed up until the wee hours more than a couple of times, finishing up the final race of a very tight championship.
We already mentioned the race tracks, which are functional, sturdy, and pretty, but the bits are solid across the board. Even though each deck is functionally the same, the riders all look different with their own attitudes. There are also not that necessary but welcome player boards, and the actual bikes are simple but great. Perhaps the R and S could be a bit more clear on some, but the different sculpts help and you get used to it pretty quickly. For a generally pretty low price game, you really can't complain about either the quality or quantity of what comes in either the base game or the expansion.
Flamme Rouge is not going to be the perfect race game for everyone. There are no crashes or dice or speeding ahead. It's a much more nuanced affair where you need to understand when to coast and when to sprint. But for anyone that appreciates a bit of strategy with their racing, It is an incredibly easy to understand and surprisingly nail-biting gem of a game. With the right group, this little bike race can get downright exhilarating as you hold on to that 1-9 card for a final sprint, or you get a little bit too far ahead and you hope you've got just enough gas to cross the finish line before all those exhaustion cards come back to haunt you. And because you have two racers, you're never really out of it. We've played more than 20 times, and it practically always comes down to the wire. If you're playing with two players, the Peloton expansion is a necessity. But if you want a light racing game that cuts out the randomness, we highly recommend Flamme Rouge. And that is it. Let us know in the comments about other racing games you love, especially if they play well with two players. And please do like and subscribe, and hopefully we will see you all next time for another game.